Did that guy escape from the asylum? Someone sneered in the break room, glancing toward the man sitting motionless at the edge of the yard. His head was shaved, he wore dark sunglasses, and his uniform was so threadbare it looked like it'd been dragged straight out of Desert Storm. For 3 days, he hadn't uttered a word, hadn't interacted, hadn't joined in, yet there was something in his silences, though he felt no need to prove anything, because he'd known the ending long ago. Then, when an officer absent-mindedly rolled up his left sleeve, silence fell. A strange tattoo appeared. KLL 13, no one knew what it meant. But from that moment on, no one dared call him the escapee anymore. The question was, who was he really? And why had he returned? If you've ever felt forgotten by the world, this story is for you. Don't look away, and if it feels familiar, hit like, because maybe you've lived like him. His name is Ethan Ward, 46 years old. No call sign, no wall of accolades, no shiny medals when he reports for training at Fort Bragg. Just a lone name printed on the new recruit roster with the ink smudged, as if the system itself wondered how he ended up here. He arrived unnoticed. An older man among a group of young, muscular, driven recruits who had never truly known defeat. Ethan did not smile, did not shake hands. He quietly collected his gear like a shadow, made his bunk, hung his name tag on the rack, then sat down carefully as if even the steel cot held memories. From that moment, he was a quiet void in a room full of laughter and curses. No one accused him of arrogance, yet everyone sensed something was off. He didn't look around, didn't ask questions, gave no sign of eagerness to learn or of needing to. When they discovered he'd once been a SEAL, suspicion rippled through the ranks. Why would a veteran from America's most elite unit willingly start again among those who had never even fired a real weapon? No one asked, and Ethan offered no explanation. He neither shunned nor revealed himself. His silence was not defense but choice, one that made gossipers hesitate, jokers uncomfortable, and young officers feel they were missing something. On the first muster under North Carolina's blazing sun sweat coursing down their collars, sand clinging to new boots, a young lieutenant, full of the "we are the next generation of glory" bravado, passed by Ethan. He cast a speculative glance, then slapped Ethan's back to test its sturdiness. "Don't let him collapse climbing those walls," the lieutenant laughed. A few recruits tittered. It was a harmless joke, or so it seemed. But when Ethan slowly turned his head, everything changed. His gaze locked on the lieutenant. Not with fury, not with anger, but with a stillness so deep and quiet it felt like midnight sea. Ethan showed no obvious reaction, yet every witness felt their throat go dry. No one could say precisely what lay in that look. Perhaps the exhaustion of a survivor. Perhaps the warning of a man who'd seen horrors they couldn't fathom. Or maybe it was a silent plea. Don't repeat the past. I have suffered enough. The lieutenant staggered back a half step. He didn't apologize, but he didn't joke again. From that day, Ethan was left in peace. No one patted his back, no one asked about his past, and no one dared meet his gaze for long. He went through the training drills like a man born to handle every rifle joint, every footfall, every whistle, not too slow, not too fast, but always precise, not eager, not complaining, but resolute. While the young recruits laughed at every stumble, Ethan breathed evenly, as if fatigue were unknown to him. The way he checked his pack straps, the way he cleaned his weapon, and the way he never judged each gesture hinted he'd stood where mistakes meant death. They no longer whispered that he'd escaped from a mental asylum. Yet they still wondered why he returned. A man who'd reached the summit, held top-secret orders, then vanished from military records, why start over at square one, living amid mockery and adolescent sweat? Ethan said nothing. Perhaps he never expected understanding. But to those sensitive enough, experienced enough to see the reason he came back was not lack of someplace else to be. It was because something remained unfinished. And sometimes, to close one chapter, a man must start again at the beginning, in silence. No one truly knows where Ethan sleeps. His name still appears on the barracks roster, yet many nights his bed remains perfectly made, the pillow never shifted, the blanket folded flat as if freshly unpacked. Some joke that he sleeps standing like a warhorse, others suspect he's hiding in a secret room somewhere in the compound. But most don't bother someone, like Ethan is best left alone. He does not integrate. He does not join groups. He does not take part in empty chatter about who has the hottest girlfriend or what assignment awaits after training. He never recounts battlefield tales, never pulls out his phone to show old photos, never joins the young soldier's scar contest. What people remember most is how he always appears at precisely the right moment yet never steps forward first. Ethan moves like a shadow. He neither intrudes, blocks, nor intervenes unless absolutely necessary. And when he does act, it is with a chilling precision, as if he's replayed the moment in his mind hundreds of times and is now merely reenacting it. One night, a cold wind swept across the empty drill yard behind the barracks. The overhead lights swayed, casting flickering shadows. A private passing by happened upon Ethan sitting alone in no flashlight, no word spoken. In front of him lay a flat stone, and in his hands, tiny metal components. He was disassembling something. Gently, precisely, methodically, like a musician coaxing a lost melody after years without inspiration. The private dared not approach. Yet later he would say he was diffusing a dummy explosive as if apologizing to each tiny piece. No one could verify that. But by dawn the rumor spread. Ghost never sleep, she's diffusing memories. Another time, during a simulated tactical exercise, a thunderous explosion rang out from the live fire range. A rookie collapsed, gasping, eyes wide, body shaking. He tried to rise but could not. Panic overwhelmed him like a tidal wave, pulling him from reality. Instructors at first thought he was faking until they realized it was real. And the first to kneel beside him wasn't an officer on duty, it was Ethan. He said nothing. No shouting, no pats on the head, no rote, "Take deep breaths" from the manual. He simply sat down, placed a hand on the young soldier's shoulder, and met his Gazino pity, no urging, only a nod, as if to say, "I've been there, and I'm still here." 30 seconds later, the rookie's breathing steadied, then he wept, then fell silent. From that day on, people began to notice. Rookies training near Ethan were injured far less often. Weapons he inspected never jammed. Gear straps, dummy grenades, maps, all met standards with quiet exactness. He spoke to no one, taught no one, yet anyone who watched long enough learned something. His weapons were always spotless, not merely polished for inspection clean, but immaculate as a prayer reach cleaning a ritual in memory of someone who could no longer do it. Officers offered no praise. They merely glanced, made notes on their clipboards, then nodded, careful not to disturb something sacred. Ethan was not fast. He did not push himself in the fitness drills, but every stride he took was perfectly timed. Every punch landed at just the right range. Every movement ended precisely, no repetition needed. As if he already knew the rules of the exercise but chose to replay it slowly, deliberately, like rereading an old book to find the passage you missed the first time. No one knows where he once bore wounds. No scar is ever visible. Yet people began to understand some wounds bleed unseen. Some pain lies beneath the skin. And some men need say nothing to prove they have walked through hell and survived. Ethan is one of them. The first question didn't come from a senior officer, but from the challenged pride of a young man. Lieutenant Morrison, 29, was the archetype of the U.S. military officer. Intelligent, ambitious, believing in hierarchy. To Morrison, every individual must have a transparent background, a clear rank, and a defined role in the machine. Someone like Ethan Wardsilent, with no verifiable past, sharing nothing but a cold stare, was an unacceptable gap. "Who is that guy?" Morrison whispered as Ethan strode past the training field, lifting his rifle as if it were a dead branch. "Why hasn't anyone checked his records?" That question became an order days later. Morrison summoned Ethan to the administration office, where he sat behind the desk like a teenage judge. Ethan entered and saluted by regulation. Morrison did not return it. "You have no valid paperwork," Morrison said evenly, as if reading charges. "No unit of origin, No service record, no medical clearance. Who are you? Ethan remained silent. For a few seconds, only the hum of the air conditioner filled the room. Then he replied, briefly, cutting the space in two. You're not high enough rank to ask that question. Morrison's eyes narrowed. He was unaccustomed to being challenged, especially by an unknown older recruit. Angrily, he slammed the empty file folder onto the desk, enunciating each word. I will not let you undermine the discipline of this unit with your cheap anonymity. Ethan said nothing. He turned on his heel, opened the door, and left the office without permission. Morrison watched him go, cheeks burning not with shame, but with the frustration of not understanding that man. That afternoon, Morrison filed an internal complaint. Reason: unauthorized infiltration of military training system, individual with unclear identity, uncooperative behavior. An investigative team was dispatched. That evening, while Ethan was on the parade ground, they searched his locker. They found nothing unusual except for a small bundle wrapped in canvas, tucked deep behind his personal toolbox. It was a slim notebook, coverless, blank. Inside, only one page bore a single image, the tattoo KLL-13, redrawn in black ink. One investigator immediately stood and called his superior. The call lasted less than a minute, but when it ended, the entire team left silently, leaving the notebook behind as forbidden evidence no one dared touch twice. The next morning, Ethan was summoned to the command office. This time, waiting for him, was Colonel Harlan, known to have served at Langley during the darkest days of the Middle East conflict. Ethan entered and stood at attention, silent. Harlan studied him for a long moment, then slowly rose. He inhaled, raised his hand and returned the full military salute. Only the stunned junior aide sat witness in the corner. We thought you were dead, Harlan said, his voice hoarse. The last time I saw your name was in the records of Operation Phantom Sand. Ethan did not respond. He only nodded slightly, as if confirming or closing a recollection better left untouched. An hour later, Morrison was called in. Regarding the Ethan Ward investigation, Harlan said calmly, I want you to withdraw the complaint and send a personal memorandum of apology. Morrison gripped the brim of his cover but could not object. Sir, we still don't know what he really is. Harlan gazed out the window at the afternoon sun slanting through scratched glass. There are people who don't need to be something in order to belong here, Lieutenant. They are why we still survive. From that moment, everything changed. Ethan's name began to be whispered differently. No longer the odd old SEAL or quirky ghost, but the man who returned from the erased mission. Kandahar. A unit without a flag. A mission forbidden to mention. A report stamped, lost with honor, then redacted after 72 hours. All that remained was one sign, KLL-13. No one knew for sure what it meant. But they knew this. Morrison fell silent from that day on. And Ethan remained as ever diffusing bombs in the night, cleaning weapons by hand, never stepping forward first, though he always saw what came next. Dear audience, please relax or take a sip of water, then stay tuned, more surprises lie ahead. Comment 1 if you're enjoying the story so we know you're still here. That day, the sky was overcast. Not the kind of black clouds heralding a storm, but the pale gray light of a heavy afternoon, as if the heavens themselves hesitated between rage and surrender. The drill yard was marked into square plots of coarse sand, enclosed on all sides by chain-link fencing, cramped yet empty like an old cage for silent confrontations. Hand-to-hand combat testing is a mandatory part of the training curriculum. It's typically viewed as a demonstration of strength, reflex, and spirit. But in reality, for most recruits, it's an unspoken power struggle: who can take down whom, who dares strike first, who can make the other freeze in fear. The name called up to face Ethan that day was Travis Kincaid. 19 years old, nearly a head taller than Ethan, muscular, sun-bronzed youth brimming with enough energy to ignore fear, he loved victory, and even more so loved spectators. Before the bout, Travis turned to his mates with a smirk. Watch me make that old man cry his back out." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Since the tattoo incident, Ethan was eyed warily, but Travis was different. He didn't buy into legends. He believed in fists. The whistle blew. Travis charged like an arrow, no feinting. A Muay Thai-style heel sweep powerful enough to break ribs whistled through the air. Sand sprayed upward, a swirl of wind followed. But Ethan did not move like a man on defense. He merely tilted his torso and took half a step back. The kick sailed past empty air. No impact, only the force slipping by. And before Travis could regain balance, Ethan was beside him, only arm extending, fingertips touching lightly at the center of his throat. Travis's body froze instantly. Not from pain, but from loss of control. He staggered, eyes wide, then crumpled, his nervous system seemingly drained of power. The whistle blew again. An instructor dashed over to check his breathing. Travis recovered in seconds, no injury, no bruise, but he trembled, as if he'd fallen from a great height. The instructor turned to Ethan, voice rough with embarrassment. "What the hell was that?" Ethan stood unmoved, his expression devoid of triumphantly, a deep, shadowed stillness and regret. Then he spoke, loud enough for all to hear, yet soft as a whisper. "I learned that from men who no longer live to teach it." No one spoke, no applause, no laughter, only a silence that stretched the yard into emptiness, as though every other sound had been swept away. Travis was helped off the field. He didn't look back, didn't speak. Strangely, he wasn't ashamed, just silent. A silence born of seeing a limit he never imagined. Ethan walked out of the enclosure as though strolling down a hallway, unhurried. His footsteps sank deeper into the sand, as if his weight lay not in muscle but in something larger, heavier, buried in memory. Afterward, the recruits whispered among themselves, no longer joking. One said, "That was a carotid strike." Another claimed, "He used to train at Bud's special classes." Some only shook their heads. "Doesn't matter who he is. What matters is, he didn't want to have to do that." And indeed, Ethan did not smile, did not look victorious. He only stared at the sand where Travis's footprints still lay, then returned to formation. To those who have truly fought, victory brings no thrill. It is merely another memory added to an already overflowing drawer. Curiosity is always a dangerous thing. But inside the barracks, where people are forced to live close together in cramped quartersit, can sometimes cross the line of mere politeness. The young soldier's name was Dawson, only 18 years old, with eyes that always gleamed with equal parts challenge and wonder, like a child let loose in a toy store. He didn't hate Ethan, he simply couldn't understand him, and that drove him crazy. To Dawson, anything unclear had to be exposed and examined. That day, during a weapons inspection, Ethan rolled up his sleeve to clear dust from an M4 carbine. The tattoo KLL-13 appeared. Dim black, no decoration, no explanation. Dawson stood nearby. And in a fleeting moment of youthone, those who've lived long enough often regret, pulled out his phone and snapped a photo. The picture wasn't artful, but it was clear. Very clear. Within hours, it had circulated through the recruits' private chat. Some emojis, a few throwaway comments, then a veteran assisting with training a man who'd been stationed in Guam saw the tattoo and fell silent. He didn't reply or react. He simply saved the image and forwarded it privately to someone higher up. And so, the spiral began. Within hours, Dawson's phone was confiscated. No one shouted at him. They only asked, "Who did you send this to?" Then they wrote something in a logbook and told him to return to his bunk and speak to no one about it. Meanwhile, Ethan was in the arms room when he received an urgent summons. No explanation, no warning, no alarm bells. Just an armored Humvee parked at the gate, its rear hatch swinging open. A man in plain clothes nodded at him. Ethan asked no questions. He set down his rifle, dusted his trousers, and climbed in. Life in the barracks went on as usual. But once that Humvee departed, an unnameable tension began to ripple through the recruits, a prickling sense that something had been done that could never be undone. Morrisonte lieutenant who'd once provoked Ethan was the first to stride into the commander's office without knocking. He needed answers. Harlan said nothing. He simply slid a file folder across the desk, a printout in black and white from a sealed database. No name. Only the tattoo KLL-13, extracted from a file sealed in 2009, and one red ink warning: restricted, operational Ghost Shadow, no civilian or military access below Eagle 7. Morrison closed the folder more slowly than usual. For the first time, he understood that Ethan was not merely a lone old man lost in the system. He was a link to an operation erased from history, but whose weight lingered like ash in a survivor's lungs. That evening, Dawson was summoned again, this time to Military Security's interrogation room. He was instructed to write a statement, speak to no one. When he asked what crime he'd committed, the officer stared so long he shivered and then said, "You haven't broken a law, but you've opened what should remain closed." And then silence. As for Ethan, he did not return to the barracks for 3 days. No one knew where he was, what he was doing, or whom he faced. But when he did come back, the first thing everyone noticed was not his expression but the way his escorts stood. 3 men in plain clothes, no insignia, no visible weapons, yet every step they took, every glance they exchanged, made it clear they were not civilians. They were ghosts accustomed to crossing boundaries ordinary people are never meant to see. They led Ethan into the commander's office. No one else was allowed inside. And an hour later, Harlan emerged, eyes red, shoulders bowed, as if shouldering another fragment of a history he thought had been buried. After that day, the photograph ceased to circulate. Not because anyone ordered its ban, but because everyone understood, some things should never be spread, some names should never be spoken, and some stories are not meant for the light of day. 2 weeks after the incident, the barracks received new orders from Regional Command. The document was only 1 page long, but it was enough to halt all speculation. Ethan Ward was removed from the recruit roster. He no longer had to stand in chow lines, attend morning roll call, or appear in training rotations. His new title appeared beneath a faded red header: Special Advisor, Strategic Combat Training Unit Level 7. No one in the camp knew exactly what that title meant, only that it had never existed before. And from now on, any tactical exercise overlapping his schedule would have to be reviewed. Lieutenant Morrison was the first to be reassigned. There was no farewell ceremony and no one dared ask why. He simply departed one early morning, head bowed, his pack noticeably lighter than when he'd arrived. A few days later, Colonel Harlan submitted his resignation. His internal memo gave no reason, but anyone who had witnessed how he'd saluted Ethan the day before understood. Some encounters strip you of the right to command. No one saw Ethan again, yet his name began to be spoken more often, no longer as a strange relic, but as a quiet reminder. Be careful, Ghost is watching. That phrase surfaced whenever someone prepared to cut corners, cheat on the physical test, or mock a comrade. No one knew who coined it. It wasn't in the training manual yet, it spread like an unwritten law. Ghost, not as a nickname, but as an unseen presence. No one truly knew where he was, but the hand-to-hand drills began to shift. Some simulated scenarios grew more unpredictable. Psychological elements were woven into exercises, pushing soldiers past their comfort zones. No warning was given, yet recruits felt the change. And when someone asked the instructor, who rewrote the curriculum, the only reply was, command. Later, a few veterans would recall glimpsing a man entering the command office in plain clothes, no name tag, no weapon, but every officer present snapped to attention as if a star had entered. The man spoke little, nodded, issued 3 brief orders, and departed. No one could confirm, but they believed it was Ethan. To the young soldiers, he remained an enigma. To the veterans, he was the echo of an era whose deeds were never recorded, because if they had been, every map would have had to be redrawn. Ethan left no memoirs, he shared no debriefings, he never taught in a classroom, never spoke from a podium, and had no social media profile filled with stirring youthful photos. Yet his presence was felt in how others began to conduct themselves. They cleaned their rifles more carefully. They observed their comrades longer before passing judgment. They came to understand that in the military, silence is not weakness, it can be the last proof of loyalty tested to its limits. To anyone ever dismissed for being too old, too quiet, too different, Ethan is living proof that dignity does not come from loudly declaring who you are. It comes from living rightly, even when no one sees, and standing firm when everyone else has turned away. His story has no dramatic finale, no final medal ceremony, no ostentatious glory, but it leaves behind something deeper, a silent shift in how others choose to live. And sometimes that alone is enough to be called a legacy. Ethan Ward's story is not about glory, but about steadfastness and silence. It reminds us that you need not shout to be heard, nor vie for recognition. Sometimes, simply stand firm, do what is right, and do not abandon yourself, and the world will fall silent to listen. If you have ever felt past your prime, overlooked, silently enduring, you are not alone. This story is for you. A sigh written in discipline, a nod to those who have survived more than they ever reveal. Thank you for staying to the end. If this story moved you, please leave a like, share it with someone who's ever felt forgotten, and comment below on what keeps you standing today. This channel exists to tell what others have missed, and perhaps the next story could be your own.